Hello and welcome back to Protect Life here. Welcome back to the conversation, Breaking the Consensus. Before we start, I'd like to remind you that the subscribe button is there. If you can click on that, then anytime we have new material coming up, you'll be advised of that. And also, as you know, we have a number of very important campaigns. Even in the midst of this pandemic, we have to keep fighting away. And we need your help to do that. The donate button is there. Anything that you can give, I can promise you, will be used well to support those life values that we all share. Today, I am delighted to be talking to John P. Mallon in Glasgow, I think tonight, or outside, near Glasgow anyway. John P. Mallon was the co-founder, along with Brian Timmins, of Sancta Maria. So, Brian, give there's a bit a sense of who you are and how you came to do what you're doing and what you're doing. So,
well,
who are you?
good question to start. Well, my name's John, and I'm, as you said, the other half of Sancta Familia with my cousin Brian Timmins.
Sorry.
Don't worry, everyone gets it wrong. It's not a very accessible name.
I wouldn't mind if it's written in front of me.
Listen, we've been called Sagrada Familia, Sancta Maria, Sandra Familia. So don't worry about that. You're not the first, and you won't probably be the last. But what that name comes from is the Latin translation of our parish, the Holy Family, Sancta Familia.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the parish where Brian and myself grew up. It's the parish where we still attend, and it's the parish where we're still based, essentially, where we do our work from. What happened really, many years ago, talking about 6 years ago now, Brian and myself were in different jobs, different career paths, but we still had a common love for our Catholic faith and video making. So what we did was we decided that we'd offer, the parish priest was looking for a Facebook page, and we decided we would offer our services to him to promote the parish, promote the things that were going on, film things, and just share what we saw was the beauty of our Catholic faith. But very quickly, after putting our videos and our content on that page, it grew and grew and grew. And more people were asking us locally in the diocese and beyond to do work for them, to cover things for them. So we branched out and we did things in other parishes, especially like Carfing Grotto, which is our national Marian shrine, just 2 miles up the road from us. So that grew and grew, and we decided that we can't continue doing our jobs and doing this at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
We had to cut one of them. So we decided we would take a risk and we would go for this as a business / vocation, because we do get paid for the work we do, but we decided that we would try and make it a full-time concern. So we did that 5 years ago in 2016, and it became a full-time business for us. And from there, we offered our services to Catholic churches, promoting and growing. So really that's how it began. And now we're doing all sorts of different things. I don't know what information you want to hear about it,
You started off as videographers.
Mm-hmm.
That was your prime, but you've branched out from that.
Mm-hmm.
I see you do documentary, short and long form documentary. You work in social media.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what we did was we ran the parish social media page, but very, very quickly it became bigger than a parish concern as we were taking on more people, more followers who necessarily hadn't been to the parish or heard of the parish, but were interested in the content we were producing on a kind of generic, wide, Orthodox Catholic view. So that grew and grew and grew. So we changed from a parish page to become the Sancta Familia page as its own concern. And I think that's now, the second most followed religious, certainly Catholic page in the United Kingdom and Ireland, I think, with the number of followers it's got just now over the last 5 years. But we do, as you mentioned, we do documentaries. We've done various work and promotion of initiatives, such as in 2017 the Rosary on the Coast, which we organised for the UK across Scotland, England and Wales, and that was around the entire coast. I think 45,000 Catholics turned out for that day. We also were involved with the Relics Tour of St. Therese, who came in 2019.
Mm-hmm.
to Scotland. We were involved heavily with the organisation, the media work for that, promotion and coverage of it as well. So we followed her relics around the entire country, which was incredible. And this last year, during the pandemic, we started work with SPUC, Society for the Protection of Unborn Children. So we work with them very closely, and also at Carfing Grotto, our national shrine, to promote that. We do. It's kind of hard to pin down what we do. We live the life of the church. We live the life of sharing the gospel. We live the life of promoting the faith on social media. It's hard to explain. I don't really know how to explain it.
Just for a moment, just look at the whole area of social media. I know that if I'm talking to people, say in the area of communications, whether it's about church issues or politics or whatever, there's a sense, we have to do social media. We have to have a Facebook page. We have to do Twitter. We have to do Instagram. We have to do now TikTok or whatever it happens to be. I would sometimes say, why? What is it you want to do? What is it you want to achieve? And all they know is that we have to do that. So it's an area that I think that historically, particularly people who are more traditional, have been nervous about. They worry about. They don't feel very at home there. If you're going to, and this is not a fair question, but if people are out there who are thinking about just their own local parish or their organization, they're doing Facebook or they're trying to do more social media, what is, if you could idea some the good way to go, or the positive things that people should be doing, or maybe sometimes it's easier to say the mistakes that people make that they should try and avoid.
So you've asked quite a few questions there. I'll try and break down what you said. Obviously, the first thing you're asking, why of social media, for especially those who don't feel comfortable with it. I think from an evangelization point of view, the church has always embraced technology, media, in whatever form over the last 1,300 years, since more of the church's history. For example, I just think back to how the church was one of the first to print the Bible. They think of the Bible there, which is often you often hear from certainly many Protestants that they were the first to promote the copies of the Bible. And it was actually the Catholic Church that promulgated the Bible, printed, and made use of that. I also think back further, when people maybe couldn't read or write, stained glass windows communicated visually what we believed in the Catholic faith, to explain the tenets of our faith visually, through art and through sculpture, and those are all mediums. And social media is a modern media now, where people are. And I think the church does need to go where people are. There's no point relying on traditional media as much anymore if there are souls out there who need saved. There are souls out there who need to hear the word of Christ, to hear the gospel. And if they're not being sought by us, we're not doing our job properly. I'm talking about priests, but also talk about laity as well. We have to do everything we possibly can to evangelize and spread the word. And that is not just through all our actions and all our lives, but through social media. And that kind of leads me on quite happily to the pitfalls. Of course, when you put yourself out there as being a Catholic, whether in life, in your work, in your family, there is a demand on you that there is not of others. You have to be that witness in everything that you do. So yeah, I'm very careful on what we post on social media. Obviously, I'm very aware that being one of the largest Catholic pages, we are independent of the church, but we work closely with the church. So we always are very, very careful to keep fully in line, as we believe, with the church teaching, but also to try and be respectful of other people as well. One of the pitfalls of social media is people get very heated. And certainly I'll put my hands up and say sometimes I don't get things right. We all make mistakes. I try to do as best I can, but people do tend to be sometimes argumentative or more braver in attacking other people behind a screen or behind a keyboard, because they maybe lack the repercussions that would occur face to face. So that's something we try and encourage and foment a positive atmosphere on our pages. And I certainly think part of the reason that we're successful is because we do that. I think we engage with people in a human way. I think we engage in an authentic way with people. We show the human side of ourselves, our struggles, our beliefs, and I think that's the key. That's really the key essence for me. Social media is Catholic authenticity. We have to be authentic. I don't know if that answers what you're looking for, but
No,
that's just my view.
I think that resonates. I mean, not just but in life in general. People respond to the authentic. They smell the fake. I think there's people, even if they can't maybe articulate intellectually, they get a sense if something is not quite on the up and up, or something is a bit fake, a bit false, a bit wrong. If you're authentic, you might be a bit rough and ruddy, you might make mistakes, but people are willing to forgive if they believe the thing is authentic and in good faith. Although, well, I say that, willing to forgive. You in the world of social media, I mean, you inevitably will be encountering people who are out to look for a row. It seems to me that one of the things that you learn, the difference in what has been described as the new religion of modernity, whether you call it wokeism or whatever, one of the big things that it lacks is redemption and forgiveness. They're big into finding sin and rooting out sinners and burning them, but very, very hard to get forgiveness.
No, I agree. Absolutely. I think your point is spot on, and essentially, we have the same issue here in Scotland, United Kingdom, as probably the same in Ireland as well, and indeed Western world. We are a clickbait society, but we're also, I'm talking in general, we are a non-forgiving society. We want to see, if you can call it blood, suck the blood from someone. We want their pound of flesh. We want to have them flayed before the public courts and public opinions, if you don't conform to their viewpoint. And I think, I think absolutely we are in a dangerous situation. We're at the point now, especially now, where we're going to see more legislation, especially in Scotland at the minute. There's a recent bill that's come in from the government, Scottish government, on hate crime, which is very, very poorly worded. It's very vague. It could be manipulated to essentially persecute those who have dearly held religious beliefs and accuse them of either being bigoted or phobic of some kind against others, which is not the case. So we do have that situation where putting yourself out there like I do, I think, in a way. I mean, part of me thinks, I love what I do. I always think I wouldn't do anything else, but if it came to a point I was looking for another job, would my social media footprint as a Catholic in this day and age come back to haunt me? Sadly, I think probably the answer is yes. Small martyrdoms, I guess.
You adverted to the legislation that the SNP are sponsoring to bring in against hate speech legislation. I don't know if similar legislation is being considered at the moment in Ireland. And I just want to talk a little bit about that because, well, two things. One is, I don't know, did you see a video recently it was nothing to do with hate speech, but rather was to do with the COVID regulations. And there was a case in Glasgow where police arrived at the door of a flat because a neighbour had said that there was they were having visitors inside. The woman of the house was there. Her daughter had recently returned from hospital. She became very upset. I don't know, did you happen upon this on social media?
Not maybe that precise story, but there are obviously several cases of this happening where people
I don't want to, it's not to do with the COVID thing specifically, but rather, do you get a sense in that there's a certain instinct in this kind of new progressive governance where the space that is allowed to the private is shrinking all the time? And that's got to be a concern for, I mean, we'll get on in a minute to the social media, but in general life, that there's a sense that they're right to intrude into your own private space is they're getting more and more intrusive.
Absolutely. I think, just talking back to the kind of talk around the SNP's hate bill, I mean, there's people who are well-meaning in the SNP and members of the party who are Catholics and things, and they, you can see some of the reasoning, but some of the things they suggest around that bill is quite worrying. You're hearing the Justice Secretary mention that perhaps hate speech over dinner table in your home could be prosecuted, which to me sounds very sinister.
Speech in your private speech in your home.
Yeah, that was something which was muted or suggested by the Justice Secretary, the SNP Justice Secretary, that you could be essentially prosecuted over something you've said over the dinner table. So we are crossing the line in this country where we're at a turning point where even just holding a religious belief, which is opposed to this political correct mainstream way of thinking, could lead to prosecution. It's concerning.
So if we talk about areas like, for example, churches teaching on sexuality, or it's a sort of Catholic anthropology on the role of the nature of sex, of being as they say, a binary, bimorphic, sexually reproducing animal. In other words, male and female. Do you have a concern that if you were to essentially say something that until 4 or 5 years ago would have been regarded as being absolutely middle of the road, normal thing to say, that everybody has believed since 150,000 years ago, is suddenly now you have to worry that might actually land you in trouble? Or are we being a little bit precious about this? Or do you think there's a real danger?
I think currently, no. I think there would not be a situation that would arise. I mean, obviously, there's absolutely no need for unjust discrimination towards anyone, with any one of those, with differing gender ideologies to us. But I think we're not quite yet at the point where stating biological truths or stating Catholic doctrine on these things will have a legal problem for us. I think we could see that in a few years' time. Certainly, there's been some examples of that recently in Scotland with professions such as teachers who don't hold an inclusive viewpoint. That can occur. So yeah, we are at a crossroads with that in Scotland. And I think this election coming up is something which is quite depressing because there's not really that much options for us.
I'm very, very far from an expert on the history of Scottish politics. You mentioned, you adverted to the fact that there are Catholic members in the SNP. Historically, would there have been a perception the SNP would have been rather hostile to Catholics?
Yeah, I mean, there's always there's always the old joke about the SNP being soon no pope. I mean, that was probably a bit exaggerated. In fact, my granddad said my granddad is no longer here. He was very anti SNP. There was a perception they were tartan Tories as well. But now I think since Alex Salmond took over as leader of the party in the late 80s, he shifted the perception more towards this big tent nationalism of Scottish the Scottish party, where he courted, in a sense, the Catholic Church in Scotland, because he knew that without Catholic voters, there wouldn't be this sort of possibility of a swing towards independence. I'll put my cards on the table. I do support independence for Scotland, and I do support Scotland's right to nationhood, but I don't support the vision the SNP have for this country. That's my personal opinion. That's not the opinion of Sancta Familia or the Church in Scotland, but I do think we have a separate ecclesiastical system, a separate church in Scotland. So why not a separate political system? We have a separate education system, separate law system. So,
the reason I want to get there was just to ask you, because the situation in Scotland was that for a very long time, basically, if you're a Catholic in Scotland, you voted Labour. It was a kind of an automatic thing, as was very true. And most of those Catholics in Scotland were Irish, for origin, and which would have been true in England also. I know from my own family, it was quite odd. They all voted Labour. If they'd been in Ireland, they would never have voted for the Labour Party. And again, I think I was just wondering, do you think that that doesn't serve a community well, or do you think it's when any group can just take you for granted in the way that perhaps the Labour Party in Scotland or the Democrats historically, maybe the Democrats for a long time in the United States took the Irish urban vote for,
No,
or say the African American vote today, that it doesn't serve you well.
no, it doesn't. Probably will have to say I'll struggle to find someone who I will vote for this coming election. Historically, in this part of the country, in Lanarkshire, they said they could actually weigh the Labour vote here, but Labour has collapsed as a social party, certainly since the Iraq War and beyond the referendum campaign. They're very much seen now as the third party in Scotland. And there's a kind of now a binary kind of politics taking over here, where we have the SNP dominating for those who want independence and those who agree with their social policies, and those who don't voting Conservatives in traditionally non-conservative areas such as industrial heartland of Lanarkshire. We're having more people who are Protestant unionists voting Conservative as their only option.
It's just from the Irish perspective, we are kind of interested in this issue, not just in academics, because there is a sense that should Scotland become independent, that will have a deeply destabilizing effect on the wider union, and will throw again into question the issue about Northern Ireland, because of course Northern unionists in the north of Ireland have long historical and familial cultural connections with unionism in Scotland. So do you see it down the road?
Do you see
independence?
Yeah, I think independence is an inevitability in Scotland.
Really? And do you think has Brexit affected that?
Well, no, Brexit's not really. I wouldn't say Brexit affected it as such. I think it's a generational thing. I mean, to be honest, I don't know the exact latest polling off the top of my head, but I do know that the last 20 or something polls have been marginally in favour for yes for the first time. Historically, before 2014, we were sitting at 33. I say we, but those in favour of independence were sitting at 33%. Before that, now they rose to 45% famously. But if you break down the figures, interestingly, you'll see that more people, young people, 80% of them want to see Scottish independence. And it gets a bit less as you go up the age demographics, maybe those who have more cultural ties to the United Kingdom. But as I say, I think Brexit has exacerbated the issue and accentuated where we have this sort of democratic deficit in Scotland, with England voting one way, Scotland voting another, and England being numerically a bigger country, carrying through the wish.
Yeah, I think it's one of the questions. How many times would Labour have been in government in the UK if it hadn't been for Scotland and Wales?
Oh, well, I don't know about Wales, but in Scotland, certainly we haven't affected the election result.
I think that if you think of, if you were to isolate England, the Conservative Party would pretty well win every election.
Yeah.
And it's the dominance of Labour Party in Scotland and Wales that has had an effect, other maybe 97. I'm looking at you're clean shaven, which helps, and you have quite a tidy haircut. I'm just thinking from the point of view of COVID, and I'm looking at myself, and I look so badly in need of a barber.
Well, actually, if this interview took place 5 days ago, I'd probably look a bit like you. I had a beard until actually I developed a lockdown beard, and I made a mess of it, and I decided to shave it off. So I'm going to grow it back.
What's the situation in Scotland? You may be aware. We have no public worship here at all. You can go to a church privately to pray, but there's no public worship. We recently a situation where a priest who was giving communion out to a couple of individuals was interrupted by the police. Can you attend mass in Scotland at the moment?
No, you can't. What actually occurred is during the first lockdown last year, all churches were asked to close, which they did. And then when lockdown lifted in the summertime, there was a raft of measures in place to negate any risk. There was hand sanitization, there was social distancing in place, there was a cap in numbers, there was contact tracing. As part of our work as Sancta Familia to adapt to this pandemic, we have actually offered to stream funerals for people now, and we're streaming lots of funerals a week. So funerals and weddings can still take place with 20 gathering just now.
Mhm.
But no, churches in the second lockdown have also been closed, which has really split opinion here, because there are certainly those Catholics who are concerned for their health, concerned for the well-being of others in the community. But there's also those Catholics who are aware of these concerns too, but realise that the mitigation strategy in place by the church is second to none. I can attest to being probably in more churches in the last few months than anyone else. Any bishop, any priest, any politician, certainly over 60, I'd imagine. And every single one of them is so well maintained, so hygienic, cleaned down, washed. I don't feel any stress or any concern for my own health going into a church building. More so going there than a supermarket or a shop, or even just walking in the street. There's so little regard for a lot of the rules and wider public in other places, but the church is very well organised, so it's not justified. And I know there's some challenges in the court just now for that, with some things for the government's decision.
It's been over here, a lot of parishes, I think most parishes, have taken on the challenge of live streaming services, live streaming mass, and etc. I'm just wondering, do you have any tips? Presumably you've seen a lot of examples. Is there anything that struck you, and you think, something you could do better, just a small thing that would improve the experience?
Yeah, I think one thing, there's a lot of factors in place. A lot of parishes just now are suffering across the board economically. There are reduced numbers, so reduced collection, still got the bills to pay. So certainly there's an element of priests who want to invest, and if they they want to invest in good equipment. But I would say that you certainly can do the job with an iPad or an iPhone, but sound is the key. A lot of people want to hear things more than they can see, so my suggestion would be, and I've done this for a number of parishes already, is that you invest in a clip-on lapel mic wired to your iPhone that you can attach to your speaker in your church, or yourself if you can, and that will increase the sound quality, especially in the echoey churches you get sometimes.
Going forward, this is you're very much at the beginning of this. You've been doing it for 6 years, but that we're only at the beginning, in a sense of trying to understand how the full value we can get out of social media. Mm-hmm. The Americans have been doing this a lot longer than us over here, I suppose. And Mother Angelica, I suppose, was the famous, the word escapes me now, but innovator in this area, and the use of TV and whatever. Where do you see this going? I mean, how do you see this developing as a tool for evangelization and for engagement?
Well, I think the key just now, and I think there's a lot of ignorance about the faith, not just amongst non-Catholics, but amongst Catholics who do not know the faith. And I think the key use of social media is an accessible way to teach and educate. So many out there who have misconceptions about the church and the church's teaching. We only saw an example the other day of the Vatican clarifying it's that the church cannot bless same-sex unions for obvious reasons. And this led to outcry on social media from Catholics who found it, difficult to accept. Some of them, maybe have same-sex attraction themselves. Some of them have family members. But they almost took that news as if the church was denying these people something, when in actual fact...
A journalist friend of mine said, shock horror, as Catholics discover that Pope is Catholic too.
Well, I think that's part of the problem as well. I think the media have an image of the church they want to shape for themselves, and certainly that's been in the case over the last few years. And when suddenly they have a headline which they can't spin, mm-hmm. or they can't necessarily suit their own agenda, then suddenly it becomes the worst news. This is not a news story. The church has its faith. The church has its teaching, and I thought that the document was very good. It was very respectful of people. It was in line with church teaching to give people their dignity and respect as human beings. Mm-hmm. And the primary focus is to love. and to lead people to truth. And I think we're seeing that this needs to be the battleground. And I don't like to say the battleground in a sense, but we are in a battle in a sense where information, especially in the wider society, you have fake news, you have other things as well, like misinformation. We need to reassert what we believe as Catholics. We are a faith of faith and reason. We believe what we believe, but we also have reason to believe it. We have logic to it, and we think what we propose for society is for the good of everyone in society. And I think that's where we should take this, in future to social media. Absolutely,
In the last few years, we've seen a new development in the culture wars, where you've seen the arrival, shall we say, of a number of prominent figures coming from, put it this way, not from the left. And one of the most famous figures a lot of people have heard of is Jordan Peterson. But people like him, and he and others have been talking about using platforms on social media, say using YouTube or channels, using whatever, as locuses where you can provide education, for relatively speaking, to a very large number of people at very high quality, at relatively speaking low cost, and an alternative, as an alternative to that dominant narrative. Is that something you're interested in moving into, that whole kind of a, how would I say, online catechesis?
Yeah, I think catechesis is one word I would certainly think of. Also, I'm quite interested in apologetics. Now, obviously, I'm my background in education is in languages. I'm a linguist and studied at university in translation for modern languages. So I don't have any, how would you put it, theological training as such. I just share my Catholic faith from the experience as a lay Catholic, with maybe some well-read knowledge, but certainly it's something I'm hoping to explore in the years to come, is having more formalized training. And certainly the bishop of this diocese and our diocese is keen for us to do that as well, to bolster the work we're doing and give it a more theological gravitas, if you can call it that, because maybe we don't have that gravitas at the minute.
Well, gravitas is one thing, but engagement is, when you look at the figures, I mean, obviously I'm talking about huge figures, people like Joe Rogan and whatever. I mean, the numbers of people that listen to podcasts. I do a podcast, which is political cultural thing for a media platform here. And the guy I do it with is constantly amazed. He said, because he would never listen to a podcast. He says he can't stand them. But people listen. I don't know. We don't know how many, but it's very much part of the new landscape. This is something that people. Do you have that sense of younger people actively looking for alternative voices, that they are losing faith? I mean, we have this strong sense in Ireland. I don't know. Do you have it in Scotland, the UK generally? A breaking down of faith in in the heritage media, in the old standard forms of media, whether it's TV or the papers, that people are becoming having less and less faith in them, particularly younger people.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that I can't remember the last time I bought a newspaper. Must be several years now. Certainly, I wouldn't be interested in buying any of the papers here. I think the question of young people, I think there's a definite sense that we are becoming. I think there's a danger as well, becoming an echo chamber. There's an echo chamber effect as well, where we are putting ourselves. And it's maybe part of this woke culture, if you would call it that, where we don't want to hear any dissent to our own views. And I think there's a danger on both sides of that, I'll be honest. I think there's danger of the church, in certain senses, forming into factions where we don't want to hear one point of view over the other. And I think there's a danger of, some of on the liberal side who don't want to hear or certainly ban other views. And I think that is detrimental to intellectual growth, intellectual debate, and I think it's negative, and it doesn't really create mutual respect or growth in relationships with other people. Gone are the days where you could say, and maybe this affects politics as well, you could have your view and be respected for it, but now you have this toxic environment where you can only preach to the people you want to preach to, and it's an enclosed bubble. And I think there's a danger of that. I think certainly I don't define myself as right wing. I don't define myself as left wing. I define myself, politically speaking, I define myself as a Catholic first and foremost, and I would vote with my Catholic conscience. And I certainly think when we are using our social media, we want to be in the mainstream media because that's where people are. Certainly, there's a lot of questions just now over censorship and Twitter and Facebook and people moving to alternative platforms like Parler and things. I'm not so much for that because I think we then tacitly say to the wider society that our views are fringe.
Yeah.
They shouldn't be. Our views are mainstream. They're normal. They're good for society, and we should be meeting where people are. And that's just my general. I would call myself a centrist. People might put labels on me for a variety of things, but I would call myself a centrist.
So if anybody's out there and they're interested in having a look at the kind of work that Sancta Maria is doing, whether it's in social media or on the documentaries that you've produced, where should they go?
So we've a number of outputs. Our main source of output is our Facebook page, and it's Sancta Familia on Facebook. And it's got the numbers there. We're also recently we've started to grow our YouTube. That's obviously mainly for videos, so we put things there. I think that's reached about 8,000 subscribers in the last year anyway. And our day-to-day stuff, or kind of behind the scenes, is on our Instagram, so you can see it on there as well. So if that's of interest, it's all Catholic content and other kind of things as well. Pro-life, life at the National Shrine of Carfin, and Scottish Catholic history. And
your website there's for Sancta, again, if anyone was interested, the website for Sancta Familia,
Sancta.tv.
I'm looking at Sancta.tv here. Mm-hmm. So I'd like to thank you, John. I'd like to thank the listeners. Before we go, a couple of bits of housekeeping. Again, I'd remind you, if you can click on the subscribe button, and if you can help us out with the donate, that would be great. Next Tuesday at 8 p.m, we're having a live webinar with Dr. Levatino, who is a very well-known American pro-life activist. He formerly worked as an abortionist, and now he's very prominent in the pro-life movement there. So if you want to sign up for that, that should be very interesting. You can go onto the Family and Life Facebook page or the Protect Life Facebook page, and you'll see the details will be there, and you can click on. So we'd very much like you to come along and have a chat. Again, John, thank you for talking to us. It's been enlightening, and I'm sure we may be back when there are other issues. There's a couple of things that happened we didn't manage to cover tonight. We might come back and talk again. Maybe next year. Maybe if Celtic are doing better, we might talk about that as well.
Depends on the manager. Let's just say I hope it's not Roy Keane. No offense.
Oh God, no. That's not seeking a peacemaker anyway. But we won't intrude into private griefs. But anyway, until then, everybody, mind yourselves, stay safe, God bless, and good night.